Hey guys, it's Kelvin in my review for Monster. So what Monster is essentially about is we center on the character of Steve Harmon, and he is this 17-year-old student. He's just kind of going about his day, and things really end up going to shit when one day he is charged with a felony of murder that he was allegedly involved in, and basically the rest of the film is him doing what he can to try to prove his innocence, but also try to make sure that but also goes one step beyond in really showing why he is so accusatory in the first place and giving us a better idea of who he really is and if he's really going to be able to get out of this situation. So Monster overall, I was very much looking forward to this film. I know this film has been delayed for a long time now, but I remember when it first came out at Sundance and people were really raving about it and saying that it was going to be a really special film in that way, but then also looking into the cast with like Kelvin Harrison Jr. and other actors and things like that, definitely had me very excited for this film. I feel like it's a very relevant film overall, so I was really hoping this film could be something special, and it's good. I definitely did enjoy Monster overall. I think this is definitely a very effective film that I think definitely does a pretty solid job of diving deeper into racial biases when it comes to the justice system and things like that. But we are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And that is definitely, I think, one of the biggest draws of this entire film. I mean, you look at the cast here, this is a really stacked bunch overall, and I think everyone really does do a great job, but it has to be said, this film is absolutely nothing without the amazing work from Kelvin Harrison Jr., which, I mean, what else can I say about this guy that I haven't? He has had one of the most impressive debuts that I've seen in so long, with both Loose and Waves coming out in 2019, and then last year he had The High Note, which wasn't as well received, but still got to show a different part of, a different skill he had acting-wise, and now he has Monster, which I think initially was supposed to be like his big sort of debut role, and it's not a bad one because he really does do a great job playing this character of Steve Harmon and getting to dive deeper into his character and seeing the complexities in him and seeing that he isn't a perfect person. He is flawed. He's made some mistakes in his life, and sort of seeing, that this, he really is just this kid and that he is someone that, sort of thrown into this situation. I think Harrison Jr. does a really good job with that overall. He's very likable in the role. He's someone that you very quickly do latch onto, and I think overall he was just such a consistent standout throughout this entire movie for me. I really enjoyed what he ended up doing here. As far as the rest of the cast goes, everyone else does do a really good job. It's really cool to see Jennifer Hudson in a film like this. I really do want to see her do more movies because I think she's a much better actress than people do give her credit for. Jeffrey Wright is always fantastic, and that's definitely the case here. Jennifer Ehle as well, always fantastic, and she definitely does a great job. Tim Blake Nelson was a lot better than I expected him to be. He's obviously great. He is a great actor, as usual. He plays this film teacher of sorts that Steve was very close to, and he does a really good job at playing this role. I really did enjoy what he ended up doing. A$AP Rocky really impressed me in this film. I didn't really know he was as good as he was, but he really kills it here playing this character James that is sort of a mentor to Steve, but then ends up taking a bad direction within his life, and I thought he did a really great job. John David Washington shows up as well. He kind of has a bit role. Everyone does a really great job within this cast. I don't think there's a single weak link in terms of acting overall, and I was overall very impressed by everyone here. Now let's get into the directing and the writing, and I think the directing for this film is really good overall. Anthony Mandler, he doesn't have a very specific style, but I do think he did a pretty good job when it came to this film. It's dour at points, but it does try to still be a bit uplifting. It tries to give you that hope that Steve is going to get out of the situation, that Steve is in fact innocent, and I think he does a good job when it comes to the directing overall. The film never got too over the top for me. I think it walked a nice line between being subtle, but then also being sort of heavy-handed, but not too heavy-handed, and I think he overall did a good job when it came to the directing here. I was overall impressed by what he did. And then when it comes to the writing in this movie, I think the writing is really solid, especially when it comes to the character of Steve. I think they really do a great job at fleshing this character out and really getting us to see who Steve really is. I mean, this is a kid that has a whole life ahead of him. He's very much into film. This is something that matters a lot to him. He'll spend spend a lot of time just hanging out with his friends and filming things and not really caring about what it is, but just wanting to film things because that's what he wants to do. That's what he is passionate about. And it's important because it does a really good job of showing the life that could be taken away from him in an instant, the things that he cares about. This is a goal that he really does want to achieve in his life. He wants to get into film school. He wants to be able to become a serious filmmaker. And so you really do see how that starts to, conflict with this situation that he's in. He might not get to pursue that. And so, again, it latches you onto his character really well. I think even if you're not someone that's like a huge filmmaker, you can really take that passion and apply it to anything. I mean, think of something, in Steve's age when you're 17 and you have a goal that you really do want to achieve. And the idea that that can just be taken away from you because you're black and they assume because of that you are guilty in that way, I think is really well done. And they do a really good job of diving deep into that, but then also showing how Steve could potentially, be responsible for this. Because again, we don't actually know if he did this or not. We're pretty certain that he didn't, but the film does a pretty good job of really diving headfirst into, what really ended up happening. But the film is also structured in a very interesting way. And I think the writing is really good there for sure. But what the film has to say about the justice system is also really well done, because you do see that Steve is someone who doesn't really feel like he's getting a fair shot here, because he's really not. I mean, immediately they're accusing him. They're assuming that he is lying on the stand and things like that. There's a whole scene with Jennifer L's character where he's just going over how he has to say things, because if he says it in the wrong way, it could be taken as him lying, even if he is telling the truth. Because he's saying it in a particular way, they might frame it as him lying. And I think that is really fascinating to watch, but it also is something that is really going to anger you. The fact that just an innocent black teenager is in this situation that he really should not be involved in at all. It's pretty clear that he is not really guilty in any way, but because the court is saying that he is, and they clearly don't want to just look at the facts. They clearly do not want to listen to the evidence. I think it's going to hit very close to home for a lot of people, and I think the film does dive into that really well. So I do think the writing on that side of things is very solid, and I do think the film does a really good job of really, like I said, diving headfirst into his character overall. And just the things that we hear in this courtroom, the things that people are accusing Steve of are absolutely disgusting. I just can't believe that someone would be in this situation. But at the same time, we know this stuff happens a lot with recent happenings we've seen on the news. There's been stories for years about black people being in situations that they very clearly had no business being in because it didn't really involve them. But because of the fact that they're black, the court just assumes that they're guilty, and you really do see how that has a severe effect on Steve, and I think that's something that the film does do a really good job with overall. In terms of cinematography here, I do think it is very well filmed. The film has a very particular look to it, and that's something I really did appreciate. When we're in that courtroom, you feel like you're there. You feel like you are just waiting for the best possible news to unravel, but you're not really sure if it's going to. And I think that's something that they did a really good job, really kind of putting you in that environment. But then when you're in the courtyard and, he's just kind of watching people play basketball, it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more lighthearted. So I think the cinematography really does play a good role into that. And then when he's filming things, it has a whole different style as well. So that's something else I really did appreciate. The score to this film as well, I think, is overall really well done. It wasn't anything particularly special, but I did enjoy the score to this film and the editing. I will say I do think this film is a little too short. I think there are some things that we could have dived a bit deeper into overall, but the thing that is very interesting is that this film is presented in a non-linear style. You start off and he's in the courthouse, and then it kind of goes back to when he was in school, and then when he he was just talking to some of his friends, you know, playing basketball and things like that. I thought it worked really well for this film because, again, it really got us to dive deeper into him. I think if the film had presented this in a linear style, it actually would hurt the film. So I enjoyed the different approach that this film really did. So again, there's a lot that this film does do really well, but it's definitely not perfect. There are some things that do ultimately bring it down, and that is that while I really do care about Steve Harmon as a character, and I want to hope that he gets out of this, and I care about his family overall, virtually every other character in this movie, I really don't know all that much about. Because the film is so focused on Steve, I just didn't feel that the other characters really got a lot of time to really be fleshed out and really get that proper amount of time for us to really latch onto them. And so again, I think the film does a good job when it comes to Steve, but I do kind of wish the film went the extra mile in diving deeper into these other characters, the ones that are clearly responsible for what's going on. They feel very one note. When we eventually get to those characters, they feel very much just like generic stereotypes in that way, and I didn't really like the way they went about that. I thought that there were quite a few characters here that were pretty underwritten. There's really nothing to Jennifer L either. She's really just kind of like the good attorney. She wants to get him out of this situation. She wants to do what she can to make sure this works out in the best possible way that it can, but she's not really sure if it's going to. And that's really kind of it when it comes to the other characters in this movie. So I do think the film is lacking a bit in terms of character development. I think Steve obviously is great. I like what they do with his parents, but aside from that, the film does not seem that concerned when it comes to the fates of the other characters, and I think this film would have been that much more effective if it would have actually taken the time to do that, but they didn't, and that did ultimately bring the film down a bit for me. Overall, Monster, I think, is a very effective film. It has a excellent performance from Kelvin Harrison Jr., some really good writing when it comes to really showing the bias of the justice system and just how unfair a lot of it can really be, but also diving deeper into this character and really showcasing the life that he had and the life that could potentially be thrown away. I think it's a film that definitely is going to impact a lot of people. I do think it falls a bit short in terms of the other characters. We really don't get a lot of time with them. And I do think the film is a little bit too short overall, but as a whole, I definitely did, for the most part, really enjoy Monster. I think it definitely is a very effective film, and so I am going to give Monster overall a B. But overall, guys, in my review of Monster, let me know what you guys saw of this movie overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye. Moving on.